Hi guys, thanks for tuning into the channel, and today we're going to be talking about what is diabetes anyway and how you can prevent it. So diabetes has been described as a national epidemic, and it's on the rise, and it seems to be spiraling out of control, and it's costing the National Health Service absolutely billions. But what is diabetes in the first place? In normal metabolism, when we eat, our body produces a bunch of responses. And the ones that we particularly are keen looking at with regards to diabetes is our hormonal response. And hormones within the body are simply messengers. So every time you hear the word hormone, you should hear the word messenger. It carries a message, and in particular with diabetes, we focus on this hormone / messenger, insulin. And insulin's message is to tell the body that it needs to allow the broken down carbohydrates, which is our sugars, our blood sugars, our glucose, into the cells where it needs to be used. And if we don't use it, we then store it for later as glycogen. So it's in the cells for use as glucose, or it's stored in the liver or in the muscles as glycogen. Now, in diabetes, we have two types. We have type 1 diabetes and type 2. Type 1 diabetes is more of a genetic condition. So what happens is our ability to actually produce this insulin in the first place is lost. So you can't produce insulin, and that's why type 1 diabetics need to inject insulin in order for them to be able to uptake this glucose into the cells so the body can get the energy that it needs to conduct its daily activities. Type 2 diabetes, on the other hand, is where the insulin response is not received as it would have been before in a healthy body. So we become insulin resistant. So the sensitivity that the insulin would previously have had when it entered the muscle cells, and the body would have said, oh yeah, that's insulin, we know what to do here. Open up, let the glucose in, and the body gets some energy. That response is no longer as efficient as it was before. So some of the message is lost. And one way that we always describe it is thinking about insulin providing the key, and the cells have a lock, and you want to open the lock to allow the glucose to go in. So we're not getting enough keys now, which is the insulin, to open enough locks to ensure that the glucose is getting into the right spot. Now, whilst that's going on, the pancreas, which produces the insulin, isn't producing as much as it had done previously. So in some cases, you get this double effect. You have insulin resistance combined with less insulin produced in the first place. So what's the consequence of this? Well, what happens is the blood sugars can no longer get to where they need to go, so the glucose isn't getting into the cells to be used up as energy or stored for later in the liver or in the muscles themselves. And blood sugars begin to rise. And you might know any diabetics, they test their blood sugars to see what's going on. So the blood sugars start to rise, and this is where the health consequences start to come in. So too much sugar in the system and in the blood can cause all sorts of problems. So it can increase the risk of cardiovascular disease because sugar's sticky. So it starts collecting things like cholesterol in the arteries and the blood vessels. So it increases the risk of cardiovascular disease, things like stroke, things like heart attacks, nasty business essentially. The sugar can migrate to the eye capillaries, and that can start causing retinal damage, so your eyesight isn't working as good. It can also start impacting on the nervous system, and you can get things like neuropathy, which essentially causes pain in the extremities, particularly, so things like hands and legs. And you can start to lose sensation there, which means you can start to develop things like ulcers, particularly on the bottom of your feet, which is very nasty business, but the sufferer doesn't even know it's there because they've lost the feeling. And that's when you start to see things like amputation, which is sort of an extreme end of the disease, but essentially it's a very realistic consequence of what happens with diabetes, and all the way across the scale to potential death. So diabetes can kill you. and that's a very serious consequence. And unfortunately, the condition is progressive, so it's only going to get worse throughout your lifespan. But that doesn't mean to say that it has to progress quickly. You can take measures to help prevent this. And that comes down to your lifestyle, and it comes down to your diet, and it comes down to your exercise and physical activity habits. These are 3 things that you can do to really help manage the diabetes. Of course, you can have things like drug therapy, so you might be taking pills like metformin, gliclazide, sitagliptin. Don't worry too much about the names, but this is oral therapy that can help. And then in extreme cases, or people that aren't managing it so well, that's when you move to insulin and you actually start taking the injections like a type 1 diabetic. Some people will just be dealt the genetic hand that says you're going to get diabetes, and that usually happens later in life, so there are some instances that are unavoidable, unfortunately. But the majority of conditions are avoidable, or at least you can delay the onset for many years, and we're talking decades. So those that might be prone to getting it may get it 10, 20 years before they actually would have got it if they had actually managed their lifestyle a bit better. Other people, on the other hand, might reduce their risk entirely, so they would not contract it, whereas in a previous life where they didn't live healthy habits, they would have developed diabetes. You can actually prevent it by living a healthy lifestyle, so it can make a big difference. So what can you do about it? The biggest thing that you can do to help prevent developing diabetes is manage your weight. Being overweight or obese has such a significant impact on the risk of developing diabetes, it's absolutely insane. And so the first piece of advice I would give you would be to make sure that you're managing your weight in a sufficient way. If you have trouble doing that, then get in touch. Perhaps we can organise a free consultation as per one of my services that I offer. And I specialise in working with people who struggle with weight management issues. So get in touch and I can see if I can help. But managing the weight is going to be absolutely critical. Eat a healthy, balanced diet. It is literally the same advice that you've probably heard over and over again. Balance is key. So we're getting all the food groups in our diet. So we're having starchy carbohydrates, protein sources, choosing dairy options as well. So providing all the nutrients that we need. And also, really importantly, bulking your plate out with vegetables. They are so good for you. They're low calorie, they're full of vitamins and minerals, and will be a great way, one, to manage your weight, but also ensure that your body is getting what it needs. And when I talk about having enough vegetables, we're talking 5 a day minimum of fruit and vegetables, but more of it should be coming from veg. So a good way to gauge if you're having enough is when you're serving up your dinner plate, half the plate should be dedicated to vegetables, literally half. And then the rest of the macronutrients, so the carbohydrates and the protein foods, are there to complement the vegetables, not the other way around. And that's such a good strategy to ensure that you are managing your weight. And the final tip I would give you is physical activity. Make sure you're doing it. It has so many benefits, and it has been shown time and time again to prevent or reduce the risk of developing diseases. And if they could put that into a pill, there'd be someone absolutely loaded. They would have billions, but we can't do that. So what we have to do is make sure that we're conducting physical activity. And that isn't to say that you have to be out running marathons every week. It is literally as little as conducting 30 minutes of moderate activity, which is a brisk walk, every day, and you can accumulate that in blocks of 10 minutes or however you want to do it, so it can be accumulated. So you don't have to go over the top of the exercise plan or the physical activity to get the benefits from a health perspective. If you want to lose weight, it's a slightly different story, and the time frames need to go up to around 60 to 90 minutes if you're walking, but you can manipulate these variables by increasing the intensity of the exercise, and then you can start to bring down the duration. But if you don't have the ability to do high intensity, then you can increase the duration and start to get the benefits from a weight loss perspective. But from a health perspective and a reduction in risk terms, then only 30 minutes is necessary. So that's 3 things, guys. Manage your weight, eat a balanced diet full of plenty of vegetables, and also conduct 30 minutes physical activity a day minimum. And that's it. So I hope this has been useful for you. Thanks for tuning in. I'd love to hear your thoughts if you have any. And if you want to get in touch with regards to any advice, drop me an email at markgreennutrition@gmail.com. Make sure you subscribe to the channel because we're going to be uploading plenty more videos designed to help you with your fitness and nutrition goals. And also make sure you check out the website at www.markgreennutrition.co.uk. That's it from me today, guys, and I'll speak to you soon.